afternoon. You're watching India Tonight with me, Samita Karir, and my colleague Nivedana Prabhu. We're joining you live from our Delhi studios. And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, on the show, we talk about Donald Trump's policy around tariffs. You know, Nivedana, kids often get dearly attached to a toy until they find a new one. But what happens when the president of the world's biggest economy is fascinated by an economic tool to the extent that he turns it into a weapon of mass destruction? Well, that's been the story of how a supposedly capitalist president turned into global tariff king. And we will throw in a few lessons from India's economic history. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a top debate on the show today. But first, let's take a look at what my colleague Nivedana Prabhu has filed.
Donald Trump has emerged as the tariff king of the world. But look closely and his policies look strangely familiar. Tariffs, self-reliance, protectionism. This is not just modern American politics. It's the economic strategy India was forced to adopt thanks to its colonial past. From Gandhi Swadeshi to Nehru socialism to the high tariff walls of the 1970s. And now, the world's largest capitalist economy suddenly sounds a lot like India of the yesteryears. In 1905, Bengal was partitioned by the British. The protests that followed ignited the Swadeshi movement. It was the first mass economic resistance of India's freedom struggle. Boycott British goods, buy Indian-made products. Shops selling foreign goods were picketed. British cloth consigned to flames. Newspapers like Bande Mataram and Jagantar carried the message to the people. Indigenous industry found new life, from Tata steel plants to Bengal chemicals and local textiles to Chidambaram Pillai Swadeshi Steam Navigation Company. The principle was clear. Economic self-reliance was political freedom's backbone. Donald Trump's Make America Great Again isn't a freedom struggle, but its economic logic is similar. Replace foreign imports with domestic production. Now, post-independence, Jawaharlal Nehru formalized economic nationalism. India adopted a mixed economy, public sector dominance, private sector under regulation, and tariffs shielding infant industries from competition. By the 1970s, India's tariff walls were among the highest in the world. Imports were rare, foreign exchange was scarce, and everyday products became symbols of scarcity and compromise. Nobel laureate Abhijit Banerjee remembers it well, as reported in Times of India. In the 1970s, high tariffs killed most imports. Even chocolate became a casualty. Cadbury's in India had so little imported cocoa that the bars were mostly sugar and milk. The real chocolate, the bitter, rich kind, was sold by smugglers in Kolkata's New Market. Jeans, another story. It was economic protectionism at its peak, shielding domestic industry, but at the cost of quality, choice, and global competitiveness. By 1991, India opened its economy. Many industries like denim took off only after exposure to global competition. Now, fast forward to 2025, Donald Trump has slapped tariffs on allies and rivals alike: steel, aluminium, automobiles, electronics. His goal: bring back jobs. Well, revive industries, cut trade deficits, and raise revenue. A fledgling Indian economy probably needed protection from industrialized countries. And in India, the walls came down after a few decades. But Trump wants his walls to stay permanently. And there are reasons, which my colleague Anurag Joshi explains next.
Even as the world braces for the August 7th deadline for implementation of the US tariffs, the unapparent intentions behind the levy imposition on imports into the United States are becoming more obvious. Taxes collected on US imports are galloping already this year. Such levies totaled about $136 billion from Jan 1 to June 30, the highest compared with the full year numbers going back to at least 2020. the potential of revenue windfall from tariffs into the U.S. Treasury exchequer comes at a time when the U.S. economy is growing at a pace of 3%. So that was in the second quarter of this year from April to June. And that was mainly driven by consumer spending and also a decline in imports. And that compared, interestingly, to a 0.5% contraction in the previous similar period. Now, the improving the pace of revenues from import duties also boosts the cushion against U.S. debt servicing costs. These are interest costs which the U.S. government pays on servicing treasuries as the national debt in the United States climbed to almost $37 trillion. That's the current figure. It's $36.8 trillion currently. Now, looking at the heat map, the range of tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, they range from a baseline level of at least 10% on those nations versus whom the U.S. enjoys a trade surplus to peaks of 50% on Brazil.
All right, we put all that into perspective, but let's go across to our guests joining us this evening, Sumita. Let me also take that opportunity to introduce them. Dr. Jayjeet Bhattacharya, Senior Fellow, Forum for Integrated National Security, joining us this evening. Vijay Sardana, economist, will also join us in a while, but we also have Rabinder Sachdeva, foreign expert, on the show. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much for taking the time out and joining us this evening. Dr. Let me begin with you. Given, since we were also looking at how it's evolved over the years and also drawing parallels with what we've seen in Indian economic history as well. Gandhi Swadeshi was about self-reliance. Then Nehru socialism was about strategic control of the economy. So in a sense, is Trump's tariff push essentially America's Swadeshi movement? And is it more driven by national security than economics?
There are some similarities, especially the way you've put in, but there are also some things which are not similar. To begin with, high tariffs had to be put in a nascent economy such as India's in 1947, because industry follows a principle called economics of scale, which means that the larger industry you have, the cheaper your products will be. So if India could not set up large industries because others already had it, therefore, India will never be able to set up an industry. And therefore, it is taken for granted in global trade negotiations that developing economies will have tariffs put in, which are significantly higher than the tariffs put in by developed economies, because the developed economies have already set up their capacities, they are cheaper, their supply chains are in place. If we don't have this difference between developing economies and developed economies, then developing economies will never develop. Having said that, in the time of what Indira Gandhi and the previous governments did was also something called the license Raj, which excluded all domestic competition, because tariffs were put in by Japan, tariffs were put in by Korea also. But in Japan, you had, if you look at the car industry, you had Toyota, Isuzu, Mitsubishi, you name it, whole bunch of car companies. But in India, we did not allow that because of the licensing. There was some logic to it. I will not go into that context. But what the US administration is doing is behaving as if it's a third world country, as if it has got handicapped industries which need support, as if it cannot compete with the rest of the world because it is, as I said, getting into a developing economy mentality, which is quite strange because the US economy is actually quite strong. Its industry is quite strong. But why Trump has got this mentality is a big question. Now, in his assumption, by putting up such protectionist tariffs, is going to provide market access to US companies. So his focus is still trying to get more market for the US industry, be as it may be a faulty economic logic, because that's not how things work. The US industry will actually get hit harder because its input costs will go up. But cutting back to the comparison with India from 1947 to 1991, that economic policy did not lead to competition within, and it was not really focused on making the Indian industry stronger. It led to eventually something which we call as crony capitalism. So the two are in that sense different, what Trump is doing and what India is doing. I think what Trump is doing can more be compared with becoming Atmanirbhar America, because it's trying to have a resilient supply chain, especially after COVID, when inputs from China was cut off and US was left
Right.
in the lurch. And even recently, the rare earth magnets hit the core of
Absolutely.
the US economy, which is the auto industry. That's 20% of the US economy. And by cutting off rare earth magnets, which China did to US, it almost crippled US. So in a way, what Trump is trying to
Absolutely.
do is create Atmanirbhar
Absolutely, Mr.
America,
Bhattacharya. Right.
but it is not aligned to sound economic policies.
Right. Right. Absolutely, Mr. Bhattacharya, and how that's unfolding is for everybody to see. And of course, you rightly put that, that rare earth move that really crippled America and of course got it back to the negotiating table with China. But let me bring you in, Mr. Sardana. How is Donald Trump's chest thumping about getting war stopped and pursuing the foreign policy of bullying perhaps being read by Americans in his own country? Is this more of an attempt to shore up support before economic realities of a slowdown in the U.S. economy they start reflecting?
Good evening to all of you. See, there are multiple dimensions to this whole approach what Trump is taking. If you take a very simple economic justification, then definitely there is a huge trade deficit, and Trump wants to reduce that. At the same time, he knows that all the products which are coming from China are better in quality and low in cost, and American consumers are accepting them. And this is creating more and more trade deficit. This is an economic reality. On the other side, it has a political dimensions because it is reducing the American corporates and employment opportunities, because China is dumping a lot and majority of the products are at household level or even industrial level are consumed which are made in China. In fact, last time when I was in Washington, the mementos which is created for White House are also made in China. So that is one has to understand. So it has a strategic implications because more and more dependency on China will reduce the significance of US in global politics. And we have seen in case of Taiwan, we have seen in case of Iran, we have seen in case of Ukraine war. US is becoming marginalized because its dependency on critical raw material and technology is on other countries, which was reversed maybe 30 years ago. So these are multiple dimensions which is forcing Trump to take drastic measures. It has its own implication because without developing domestic industry, without securing supply chain, he is trying to disturb everything, which is, hurting him back. If I have to ask very simple question that what is the logic of increasing tariff on raw material? I can understand you increase the tariff on finished goods to protect your industry, it can make sense. But the raw material which you don't have, you are dependent on international market, you are increasing tariff on that, which is hurting your own economy, your own industrialization, your own consumers, absolutely make no sense. So I think somewhere, who gave the plot to Trump that you tax everything in one go without having your in-house capability? What we are finding is, classic example is rare earth magnets. You made an issue and ultimately you have to go back and say, sorry, that was mistake, let's talk something else. Similarly, it is just one example. If I say that there are about 80 critical technologies in today's industrial world, in 60, China is dominating.
Right.
So we have to understand that even classic example again, the
Right,
Apple
Mr.
is don't
Sardana,
want
you
to
make
invest
valid
in
points. In fact, I'm
manufacturing.
going to come back to you as far as those other aspects are also concerned, but I'd have to interject you there. Apologize for that. Let me also get in a word from Mr. Sachdeva. Mr. Sachdeva, not only thank you for joining us this evening, but also patiently, waiting until we had the opportunity to get your purview as well. Given what Dr. Bhattacharya has put into context as well as Mr. Sardana, Mr. Sachdeva, given the aspect that, in the 70s, just looking at the situation, didn't disrupt India's global standing because it was a smaller player. But the US, in fact, one of the world's largest economy, can it afford to alienate trading partners given how it has been panning out for the past couple of months?
Thank you so much. Several points. I'll try to bullet point by bullet point. Trump and America under Trump has decided that the image, the reputation of America, the perception of America in the world does not matter to them. He feels, which is a fact, we have the money, we have the military, we can do what we want. No, gloves on it, raw, exposed. Second, the issue is America is the world's #1 empire, China is #2, China is racing up, catching up fast. America has now decided that it will never ever let China become the #1 empire. That's one level of friction playing out. Now, with respect to the idea of tariffs, as you mentioned very nicely in the beginning of your program, Trump has said that tariffs is the most beautiful word in English language, and I can see why he says it now. Thirdly, with respect to trade deficit and other countries, Trump, ever since his 1970s public life, has been railing against the Japanese in the 1980s. Remember when the Japanese were buying up real estate in New York and Sony Pictures, etc., that the Japanese are buying us out. Then the sheikhs, the Arab world, they're living in the golden palaces, we are buying oil from them by water, etc. So the issue of unfair trade, or what Trump feels that the world is taking advantage of America, is an integral part of his personality. Now, with respect to tariffs, what Trump looks at, okay, their estimate is that over 10 years they will collect, if it goes as they want, at 20% tariff, $6 trillion over the next 10 years. So that's the kitty money which now Trump has in the US Treasury. With respect to now, there was talk of that American inflation, American consumers will suffer. Yes. What Trump is looking to do, like for example, the prices of cars are going up in the US, right? Because steel input costs are going up. The Trump administration is offering break on interest on car loans, helping the consumers therein. Okay, your loan interest rate will be down. Some money used there. So targeted subsidies to sectors or constituencies would be given. Like let's say, okay, steel price going on, okay, American steel manufacturers happy, okay, but car industry, aviation industry, which use steel to manufacture things, their price goes up. The Trump government gives the aviation industry manufacturers, car manufacturers, some rebates, some subsidies. So that is how he's looking at tariffs to balance out the rise in inflation and prices that we are talking about that America would see. Of course, what this also requires is that the price of oil has to stay low. So that's why Trump's all emphasis would be on keeping oil prices low, because transportation costs about 25% in logistics, whatever. So oil being low, tariff money being collected, and some money being parceled out to some specific industries. If the farm sector suffers, okay, fine, $50 billion for you over these many years, etc. So that's his philosophy of how he is approaching the issue of tariffs. Now, that is one beautiful way. If we look now, in terms of where the world is right now, yes, number one, number two,
right.
The world after the Russia-Ukraine war, and go, yeah, please.
Right, Mr. Sachdeva, I think you've made very, very valid points. You've touched upon the point of inflation as well and what it really means for the US consumers. So I'm going to be expanding a bit more on that with Mr. Sardana. Mr. Sardana, can the US administration really continue with such high tariffs, and for how long can it really continue with this policy, given that, like Mr. Sachdeva was also mentioning, there are concerns related to inflation, and very recently the IMF has also flagged some economic concerns with respect to the US market. The labor market, as we're given to understand from news, are getting impacted. The prices of imported goods are rising. So if Donald Trump really wanted to actually work for his MAGA voter base or for Americans, how is it actually working? It's not really working out, as has also been explained by Mr. Sachdeva. So for how long can the United States continue with this policy?
See, this is a self-defeating policy. Answer is very simple. See, earlier, think of a status quo world where everybody was looking for technology, sourcing, dollar. Everybody was looking at American policy. What Trump has done, he has shaken up the world and forced every world leader to think outside America, that we are not the only one here. You can think of your own alignments, your own collaborations. You can look into new partnerships and so many things. Now, look at the classic thing here, that it was a status quo which was favoring America, except the trade deficit, and there were ways to handle it. But what he has done is, by becoming aggressive, he is forcing that India should ignore America and look for new partnership. What China has done, ignored America and created a new partnership on agro-commodities with Brazil and Argentina. What Canada has done, ignored America, looking for new partnership with Europe, Asia, and India. So what I'm saying is, it is self-defeating, shooting in your own feet. What we have to understand is that he has waken up and shaken up everyone in the world that I'm not a reliable partner. I can behave in a self-interest, which can be detrimental to you. You want a better business deal, look for better partners, better associations, better associates. I think this is what is going to permanently damage the leadership of America. And this will also result in marginalization of dollar economy. And my forecast is that by 2035, you will find that dollar will be less than 50%. It means other currencies will take over. There will be new financial technologies and systems available. There will be new dimensions of energy sourcing. There will be new dimensions of minerals and technology dimensions. India will never wake up. Think of a rare earth. Suddenly, after 70 years, India is investing in rare earth technology. If that was continuing, imagine what was happened. We will continue to depend on China and America for technologies. But now they have shaken it up. So I think it is good for the world. We are all emerging from slumber. This will improve the economy of the world, capabilities of the world, but at the cost of America. So that is what we have to appreciate, that Trump has, by knowingly or unknowingly, did something great for the world, which will have a negative effect on America, even in medium to long term. And in short term, American consumers will continue to pay the price.
Right, Mr. Sardana, you make very imperative points. Dr. Bhattacharya, is that the way you look at it? This slumber party is over now, and while you, give us your viewpoint, if the US is essentially, of course, weaponizing tariffs as a security tool and using arm-twisting tactics, what are the risks of blowback from allies and from rivals alike?
It reminds me of many American corporations where a new CEO had come in and would show huge quarterly profit by cutting off all the necessary costs such as R&D, research, scientists, brand building, which are long-term costs without a short-term return. And by cutting off these costs, they suddenly show a lot of profit. And within a year or two, the entire company crashes, burns, and dies. We see a similar pattern in the way the Trump administration is looking at the US. It is, obviously losing all its strengths, as my colleagues on this panel just mentioned. The administration also said that they will cut taxes. So yes, they might go ahead and cut the direct taxes because they're getting a windfall of indirect taxes because of the import taxes, which is essentially a tariff they're getting. And therefore, they will use the tariffs that they get into their subsidize, other things and subsidize the loss of direct taxes. But does that really make it a good economy? Because you're distorting the entire tax structure. The distorted tax structure will have its impact on the industrial strength of America, and it'll have that impact very, very quickly. Also, an industry and an economy is not like a machine that you change a small little thing here and next immediately something else will change on the other side. It takes years and half a decade to a decade to change the supply chain linkages to be able to modify to the change in the environment. And therefore, it looks to the rest of the world that the US is unreliable, and therefore they're moving away to other supply chains. And the fact that India is actually looking at rare earths and critical minerals is not because of US, but because of China. So there are multiple such threats and geoeconomic threats that are evolving in the country. And if you recollect, because of US not giving us supercomputing for our weather prediction, we went ahead and built our own supercomputers. And that's happening in the rest of the world. US denied critical technologies to China. China went ahead and built those technologies, including processors, including AI, and so on and so forth. So is the case with India. Now, that may not be the case with other smaller nations who will not have the wherewithal, the resources, the capabilities to do so. So it's only large economies such as China, India, Europe who will be able to diversify and create their own technologies and sources and be able to get more industries such as critical minerals and rare earths into their own regions and strengthen their economy, which is basically what Atmanirbhar really means. That's a path we were already on. We are going to now double down on that particular strategy.
Right, sir. Whether the United States can actually become truly Atmanirbhar with respect to its manufacturing and making in America, that remains to be seen, given the fact that you pointed out to a very interesting point that it takes a lot of time, many decades, to actually move supply chains and before they start yielding results. And this is something that Donald Trump is looking at. But how soon that happens, that only remains to be seen. But Mr. Robinder, Mr. Sachdeva, let me come back to you. You mentioned about, different alliances are coming up. In fact, the other panelists have also mentioned that we are seeing deals, being done by European Union. China is also reaching out to its partners, and India also has been diversifying its ties with several other countries for FTAs. So what kind of alliances and groupings do you see firming up over the next couple of years, whether it's related to tech, minerals, rare earths?
Thank you. A 2 or 3 part answer. Firstly, quickly, last 10 days, actually, I was in China. I was invited a speaker at the SCO Summit of Media and Think Tanks. So I'll come to sharing with what kind of blocks are happening as we understand. But quickly to the point of tariffs and then back to these things. See, one example as to how Trump is looking at it and achieving it apparently. The deal with the European Union is what? It's not only 15% tariffs. See, America's average weighted tariff was 2.5% before Trump took office. So now it's 15% for the EU, which is 6 times of the previous tariff. Plus, EU has promised to invest $700 billion into America in the next 3 years. Plus, the EU has promised to buy oil and gas from America of $650 billion. So EU has promised to America $1.35 trillion in the next 3 years. How will they do it? We don't know, but that's what they promised, on top of a 15% tariff. So if that kind of money comes into America, it definitely will boost our American economy. Another thing we got to remember, and the same thing is happening with Japan. It's not only the tariff on Japan. Japan is promising $100 billion, $150 billion. Taiwan, TSMC, which was earlier investing $60 billion, is now talking about it will invest $200 billion. What is also happening, I think, which folks are not tracking, is that if this model takes traction, capital from the world will be sucked into America. Less capital will be available in other markets. He's already telling Apple and others, why are you investing in India or let's say XYZ country, invest the money here. So that is something which has not been discussed often and not understood. So capital is being sucked into America if Trump succeeds the way he is going right now. Now coming to the world blocks and all, yes, definitely yes. See, what is happening in my thesis, in fact my next book, is about what we are seeing after the COVID and the Russia-Ukraine war is a new world matrix under construction. All nations, as our esteemed panel are talking and you're talking, are at this point of time redoing their calculus. It's like the computer is rebooting. And all countries are determining how and where their national interests could lie. But the reality is no doubt that America is the big daddy in town. So you got to deal with it, work around it, whatever. But what is happening, in fact, also in parallel in this new world matrix, which is under construction, forums like be it BRICS, be it SCO, as I mentioned last 10 days, I just came back yesterday from Changchou. There were folks from Central Asia, Armenia, Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, India, and the narrative out there amongst all of these folks, think tank presidents, officials of the governments, and journalists, of course, senior, was that the American pressure is forcing countries to more actively look out for partnerships and supply chains and cultural linkages. So that is phenomenon which has already been happening. It will grow.
And that's essentially what we're looking at the moment, and that's perhaps how it's panning out. Mr. Sachdeva, I'd have to interject you there. We're going to try and get in, a quick word from you once again, but I'd also have to give the opportunity to our other guests on the panel. So, Mr. Sardana, coming back to you, given the aspect of what you had initially said, waking up the other allies from their slumber, also in a sense, it's a self-goal as to what we're looking at with US President Donald Trump. But is he also, in your opinion, Mr. Sardana, at risk of creating a 70s-style American economy, domestically secure but globally uncompetitive?
See, we have to appreciate that America will remain uncompetitive. Because today what we are discussing research-oriented economy. The transaction costs are going down because of use of digital technology. So whether you do a transaction in America, China or India, the cost of transaction remains the same. It's not that there's going to be something different. In fact, the manpower cost is high, the cost of living is high, Whole lot of expenses are there. Today, manufacturing in America is 40% more expensive than India. So what I'm trying to say is that don't assume that we will go back in the 1970 because a lot of things have changed in the world. Now, I do not buy this argument that investment will go to America. It will go for domestic market. America will never be able to compete by investing in America and exporting there from the world market, because then he has to compete against China, India, or other economies like Brazil and Canada and so many things. So it is going to be very different. And what is American economy? It is just 30 crores or 35 crore population. Rest of the growth is in Asia. It means they have to manufacture and transport to the consumption economy. Whereas the consumption economy themselves are building capacities, investing in R&D to meet their domestic requirement. So world trade will shrink, not expand, number one. Then every government has a sovereign right to put tariffs. What the Trump is doing today, tomorrow India can do the same thing to the domestic economy and to control the deficits. So it is going to be very, very different. The countries, those who have investment in research, countries, those who are focusing on R&D, efficiency, you can say the modern technologies in manufacturing and robotics and artificial intelligence, those who can produce world class at low cost will be able to export. Geography will not matter now. So I think things will change very drastically. All the investment, those who are saying that America will attract $3 trillion, it is nothing but a photo opportunity. Like in vibrant Gujarat, if you calculate, we already attracted more than $1 trillion economy in vibrant Gujarat. How much actually came? Few fraction of it. So what companies claim and what they do are very different. It is a photo opportunity with Trump, which people are encashing. After 3.5 years, it is not going to be Trump, it is the ground reality.
Right, Mr. Sardana, that's a very important point that you have made on the sustainability of these promises and whether these promises are going to hold, these promises that are being made by countries. And of course, we've already seen that these tariffs have actually been contested in a court of law. And, whether they get the clearance, the ratification of the Congress, that remains to be seen. But let me come to you, Mr. Bhattacharya, before we wrap up this discussion. Now, the Penn-Wharton model, that essentially suggests that these tariffs could shrink long-term GDP by up to 6%. And this is something that we've also been talking about. There are layoffs happening in tech and retail sectors in the United States. Jobs are getting impacted. Quality jobs are not coming up. But the wage gap gets wider, even wider, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a no-brainer. When the cost of goods go up because of tariffs, so who's paying for the tariff? When India exports, let's say, food to US and the tariff is high, that tariff is not borne by the exporter, it's borne by the consumers of US. If the tariffs go up, which is the cost going up, obviously the demand will go down, so people will consume less. If people consume less, there'll be less manufacturing in US because they use these inputs from outside, put things together, and then sell it to the domestic consumers. If there is less of consumption happening, the economy will shrink. There'll be less economic activity. If the economy shrinks, then the low cost wages that will go out of the economy because those things will shift out of the economy, and therefore it's only the high-end jobs, which is in AI, high-end technology, are the ones which will remain. The rest of the jobs will start disappearing. We have already seen a quarter of abysmal job growth in US. Pretty soon that abysmal job growth will turn into a decline in jobs in the US, and once people start losing jobs, there will be even less consumption appetite, and therefore there'll be less purchases that will happen, therefore less jobs. So it becomes very quickly a vicious cycle. Right. And economies either have a vicious cycle of going down or a virtuous cycle of going up. Unfortunately, because of the steps taken, it seems very, very likely that US will be caught up in a vicious cycle, at least in the near term.
Right, Dr. Bhattacharya. And on that note, I want to thank you as well as Mr. Sardana and Mr. Sachdeva for taking the time out and joining us here this evening. But